Amachan Mangaldas, Mr. Yarman J. Bacha, Managing Director of YJV Consulting, Mr. Sameer Chuk, Group General Counsel at Bharti Group, Ms. Manjari Chaudhary, Executive Director and General Counsel at Maruti Suzuki India Limited, and Ms. Bitika Anand, Founder and CEO of Legally Consulting and Human Elevation. First of all, I would humbly request Dr. Lalit Bhasin, an iconic figure in the Indian legal sector and a true stalwart, to give the opening address and enlighten all of us with the world. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Nipun. Thank you, Bitika. And I also welcome my co-panelists here, Mr. Cyril Shroff and Manjari Chaudhary, Sameer Chug, Mr. Vacha, and all others. This is first time possibly that I have seen that the legal league, that is the legal fraternity, definitely needs some consulting. And on a lighter note, you see, I think it is a very timely initiative by Bitika Anand, because we definitely would be approaching, you see, Bitika Anand to provide us some effective consultancy as to how to come out of this crisis, you see, which the law firms are facing. The topic itself suggests, you see, law firm management and COVID-19, the recovery code. Now, the expression recovery itself connotes, you see, two things. Firstly, that there is some crisis, and secondly, how to get out of it. That is the meaning of the word recovery, to recover from certain crisis and how to do it. Now, as Tom Friedman in recent New York Times editorial, what he said was that life will be different after the pandemic even abates. He said that this marks a historical divide, that is pre-corona, what he calls BC, and after corona, he calls AC, therefore implying that corona is a seismic event which has taken place. Now, how to come out of it? Let me make it very clear at the threshold itself. Do not expect any external agencies to help you out of it. We have to find ways and means from within ourselves. The government will not give you any help because we are not a priority in the list of the government's priorities, you see. Our regulator, the Bar Council of India, has never been instrumental in providing any welfare support to the legal fraternity right from the time it was set up, you see, way back in 1959. And so far the clients are concerned, you see, they have their own problems. The industry, the business, everyone have their own problems. So therefore, to expect any help, you see, from any external agency, I think is a futile hope, which cannot be met. Now, the crisis is essentially, which we are all facing, is essentially financial. And there are three aspects of this. How is it financial? Because I think most of the law firms would expect and experience delayed payments of their invoices already raised, deferred payments from the clients. So that itself creates a crisis. Second is you have to maintain your infrastructure costs. That is meeting the retainership arrangements, the rentals of the premises, the recurring costs. These have to go on whether there is a crisis or there is no crisis. But that itself creates a huge burden, financial burden, you see, on the law firm. And third, very significant one is that, and it is my personal view, possibly, Cyril may share the same with me or not, that there would be lesser work, qualitative work, which would come to the law firms, at least in the near future, say for another 6 months or 1 year at least. You may get some cases you see under force majeure, you see, and all that, but so far as the consultancy work, the transactional work is concerned, the corporate work is concerned, I think we should expect lesser volume of work. Therefore, these are the three features which have created this financial crisis, you see, for the legal fraternity of our country. And as I said, we have to find answers from within our fraternity. And therefore, the word code, I think, is slightly misappropriate. For it should be the recovery mode. It should be the recovery mode. And recovery mode will depend upon, you see, what each and every law firm or lawyers, how they want to cope up with that. There can't be a uniform code, for everything, but there could be separate modes. Modes could be to achieve a common goal, and there can be some common features. Therefore, I adverted to this aspect, I think about 2 weeks ago, participating in a webinar in the distinguished company of Jyoti Sagar and Rajiv Luthra and others, wherein you see I highlighted, rather coined also a slogan, that professional to professional responsibility, PPR. You have the CSR, you have the professional social responsibility, but now there is a need to have professional to professional responsibility that is helping the other professionals, you see, to meet this challenge. It is responsibility, and I believe it very firmly, with a fond hope, that the law firms who can sustain themselves for another 6 months or 1 year should be helping, you see, the emerging law firms and the young law firms to overcome this financial crisis. How that can be done? That can be done individually by the law firms, but the suggestion could be that some work, which possibly may not be very remunerative, but it will keep the young law firm, the emerging law firm busy, could be passed on, you see, to those law firms, depending upon, of course, their suitability to handle that type of work. So there could be an alignment based on specialization or the need of the younger law firms, the emerging law firms, and the larger law firms could definitely help, you see, our young colleagues who are setting up their law firms and who are fighting. It should not be a losing battle as and when they are starting. Therefore, we have to make it worth their while. Therefore, this new alignment and the work to equidistribution of work as far as possible, depending upon our specializations. If we have a firm specializing in intellectual property, they could pass on the other work, you see, to other law firms, and particularly the mid-sized law firms and the young law firms. And depending upon specializations of each and every law firm, there could be an equidistribution of work. I feel this could lead, you see, definitely to some sort of emergence out of this crisis by the legal fraternity. So I end my opening address on the fond hope that my message of professional to professional responsibility would be carried on and would be spread, you see, among the law firms of the country. Thank you very much, Bitika and Nipun, for giving this opportunity to me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure is ours completely. And from recovery code, we now move on to recovery mode. So that's a very wonderful message. Thank you so much for that. I think on this note, I would request Mr. Cyril Schroff to give the keynote address. So over to you. What are your thoughts on the summit?
Thank you, Nipun, and thank you, Bitika, for this wonderful opportunity to talk to our professional brethren. And thank you, Lalitji, for the concept of PPR. I had not quite thought about it that way, and I think you've given me, as always, something to think about. So you and I are going to have a separate chat about it in terms of what we can do. But as a leader of the bar, I think these words coming from you will have a big impact. So thank you for that. Now let me come to my keynote thoughts. So first of all, and I think it's pretty obvious that this is no ordinary disruption. The pandemic, I think, has pandemic and the lockdown, and they're two actually separate points. They affect firms of all shapes and sizes. Even though as the largest firm, we are not. Nobody is immune. In fact, whether it's law firms, sole practitioners, or even the clients, some of whom are represented here, everybody has been impacted by this crisis. So it is a little bit of the before Corona, after Corona syndrome. The next aspect is, I think everybody is guessing of how long it will last and also what shape the revival will be. Every day you have some new expert opinion or some organization advancing a theory of when the recovery will come and what will happen. But I believe that everybody is guessing, and it's a little bit like the elephant and the six blind men who are trying to find their own kind of interpretation of the crisis. Reality is that nobody knows. So there are three options, at least as far as India is concerned, whether it is going to be U, V, or W. V, I think, is personally kind of ruled out unless a vaccine is found very soon. My personal opinion is it's going to be likely to be a U with a kind of a longish bottom of at least 2 years. And I think we still it has still to get a little worse before it starts getting flatter and better. W is probably a bit further, and we'll see how that goes. So the context in which I see it from an economic and a commercial point of view is we are probably headed to a U shape with some more of the slope to fall because the number of cases are going up. I think our policy makers have run out of bullets. Maybe they've got one or two reserve bullets in their back pocket, but most of the bullets have been fired and they're not working. This crisis is also different, I think, because of its universality, and the consequences are quite brutal because it takes lives. In all other crises, you have bad consequences, you become poor, you become whatever, but you don't die. The problem with this crisis of what the difference in this and so many crises that have happened is that it is a very serious health crisis. And it's not in anybody's playbook. Nobody could have imagined this. Now, what do I see as from looking at it from a law firm leader's perspective of my three biggest challenges? And I'm sure this is representative of how many other law firm leaders are feeling. I think first and foremost, our biggest worry, and this is what keeps me awake, is the health and safety of my people. Or should we open, not open, how to open, what protections to take. This is number one issue on our mind, of the health and safety of our people. No amount of economic drivers is going to make this priority become second priority. This is the number one priority. And I know sometimes people think about, let's take a chance and, we need to get back to work and behave as if we are normal. We cannot take this risk. So I don't know whether you all read this, but I'm reminded of a recent quote by Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, when he was asked about what about profit. And his reply was, my only focus just now is staying alive. And if I'm alive at the end of this, there you got your profit. I'm not looking for any more profit than just staying alive. And he means it both in a physical sense as well as he means it in a business sense. So just even if the business remains alive, So as again, to use another cliche, "Jaan hai to jahan hai." So if you're in a reasonable shape at the other end of this, you'll be able to grow and everything will come back. So we should not be obsessed about the economics. So let us just kind of survive this. My second point is in terms of what is the challenge that keeps me awake as a law firm leader is being productive and efficient in the new normal. Everybody is working from home. We've been working from home since 17th of March, even before the formal lockdown. And our technology has held up beautifully. We've not even had one problem. But I don't know how productive all parts of the firm are. And how are we going to produce in a manner that is going to be seen as valuable to a client? And is that value going to translate into revenue or not? To go to Lalitji's point on the financial aspects of it. So when you're running a law firm of 750 lawyers and incurring 750 salaries just for lawyers plus another 400-500 support staff, you have to make sure that at least a majority of this is productive. So my second point, first one was health and safety. Second is being productive and efficient. And the third one, I think, is retaining customer proximity. In a physical world, I think you are able to retain customer proximity in a very different, because as human beings, I think we connect as human beings. But in this virtual world, can you maintain that same level of customer proximity or not, I think is an issue. And I think it becomes, instruments like Zoom and Teams and WebEx and all are helpful. But there is that something which is missing when you compare it with meeting people in the flesh. So the rules of business development have changed fundamentally. One silver lining on that is, whilst it's almost impossible to create new relationships, at the same time, I think it's a little easier to keep old relationships because nobody else can come and steal them. So I think that the strategic focus is to kind of focus a bit more on existing people whom you already know, and get sort of deeper with them. So the dynamics of business development have changed. So these are the short-term challenges. Now, what are the three medium-term challenges? And I would define medium-term really as 6 to 18 months. I don't want to look beyond that because then I'll be just speculating. The medium-term challenge, I think, is right sizing the organization. And I know it's there in the panel discussion. So I think every law firm leader is thinking about what is the right size. They're not thinking about it in a 2-3 month context, but in an 18-month context, every organization in the world is thinking of its right size. The second, I think, would be how are you going to remain relevant? The old playbook has gone. And therefore, to remain relevant in a new economy with the rules of business, your clients are changing. I think the most important thing is that it's not only just you are changing, but every client is having exactly the same problem. I think both Manjari's firm as well as Sameer's firm, you are facing similar challenges. So how do we as service providers remain relevant to you in the medium term, I think is the second challenge. And linked with that is how do you reshape your organization? How do you invest in technology? How do you look at your partnership structure? All of these issues are, I think, in the medium term. I think there are also three big opportunities. And as they say, never waste a good crisis. So this is an incredible opportunity to as well. So if you look at you can look at the glass as half empty, but you can also look at the glass as half full. So the first thing I would say an opportunity is to remedy several aspects of the firm structure and strategy that it would have been impossible to do in the pre-pandemic times. At this point of time, if you were to make kind of fundamental changes to your firm strategy and structure, you will meet very little resistance. Second, I think, is the opportunity to bring in a lot of efficiency that were otherwise much harder. I personally think that the business model of law firms is going to fundamentally change. It's going to be a combination of office-centric piece, a work-from-home piece, and a third piece, I think, is going to be in the gig economy. So every good or a reasonably sized law firm will probably run 3 horses. in terms of their talent model, and how to find that right balance, both in terms of investment as well as risk. I think is where the opportunity is, and it can be very powerful. And the third opportunity, I think, is how are we going to leverage technology in a significant way. If there's one winner in all of this, I think it is technology. And technology is going to evolve in a very fundamental way. We are going to see almost a tsunami of innovation over the next few years in every field, including in the field of legal technology. We are already starting to see some green shoots of that in innovation markets. Lastly, before I conclude, is what are some of the character traits that a leader, law firm leader leads just now? I call it the 3 C's. You need calm. I think somebody who is kind of steering the ship needs to be extremely calm. The second C is communication, over-communicate, something which I have been doing. I talked to the entire, between the lockdown and now, I have done 4 webinars talking to the entire firm and talking to the partnership almost on a weekly basis. And I think the third is compassion. It's a combination of, on the one hand, you can think about economics, but I think you also need to think about everything in a human aspect as well. Ultimately, I think a law firm is made of people, and they are not just production units. So thinking about all these 3 C's is what I have been practicing, and I feel this is quite powerful. So my message to other practitioners who are listening to this is to keep an open mind, be ready for fundamental change in the next few years, and be bold. I think just doing things the old way is not going to work. Just now we're still in the early stages of the shock, so we're just sort of processing what is going to happen. But 2 years from now, it's going to be a very different landscape. So I'll stop there. I think I probably overdid my keynote, but I hope this sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. Veetika, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cyril. I think you touched some very, very fundamental issues which we keep hearing from so many managing partners, and I think you've addressed quite a few of them today. And Nipun, now you can carry on with your.
Yes, I think with such a power-packed message now, we are all set to begin the panel discussion. So, in fact, the mantle is over to you, Veetika, now. Let's just open the panel for discussion because we have some very interesting topics coming up. So, over to you, Veetika.
Yeah. So Cyril, further on a bit on the technology part, which you had said that is changing the way the way law firms are being managed and being run. So could you really elaborate on, for law firms, which are those areas? Is it the performance and productivity is being kind of monitored through these systems, or is it the communication is more happening through Zoom, Microsoft Teams? So in your firm, like what are the systems that, and which are the areas where technology is being used to make the running of the law firm more efficient?
So thanks. So we, as a firm, we have been investing on technology for a very long time, and which was the reason why we were able to just flip over on one fine morning from work from office to work from home. So first is investment in the infrastructure, your cloud infrastructure, your kind of internet infrastructure and connectivity, all of that. Then your security systems, because when you're working in a distributed format, where everybody's home is also now your office. Cybersecurity is a massive risk. So we've spent over the years a lot of time and effort on cybersecurity as well, because it's one thing to sort of have those security frameworks when you're in office, but one thing when you are effectively have 750 offices now, because every home is an office. So thinking about that, and we have been investing in that too. And the last, I think, would be efficiency tools as well, where with the help of legal technology and also, products that are available. Very simple things like even, for example, how do you deal with signatures? Because, you need to sign your invoices or you need to sign an opinion. You know that you can't physically go to office and sign on a letterhead and send it. So these are very, very small but very important examples, because if you're closing a transaction, your lender or your investor is going to say, I want a signed opinion. So how do I give a signed opinion, which is so, and we've invested in something like that. So these are just examples of technology. The breadth of technology is massive.
Thank you, Cyril, so much. And now, Yarman, you have a lot of experience in engaging with international law firms. Can you let us know, or the audience know, what are the critical steps that you need to take to work out a business continuity or a business sustenance or a survival plan for a law firm? And does it really matter, the size of the law firm, does it matter to build this plan, or it does not, remains the same?
Bitika, thank you very much for inviting me to this seminar. The question you asked may take a few days to answer. So to try and consolidate this in a few minutes is quite difficult, but you had posed this question to me a few days ago and I've given it some thought. Unfortunately, Cyril has taken my thunder and spoken about most of the stuff that I was going to speak about anyway, but let me reiterate a few things. Firstly, I think we've got to understand what the word crisis means. And if you look at the dictionary explanation of what crisis is, it's a time of difficulty. The key word there is not difficulty, but the key word there is time. And I think over a period of time, there will be a new normal, and maybe the new normal eventually will come back to the old normal. But who knows? Time will tell. I think, as Cyril has rightly pointed out, it's going to be a mixture of various things. Before I talk about 2 or 3 buckets that I think people need to think about, the first thing I would say, and again, it's reiterating what Cyril has just said as well, I think this is a time for very strong and focused and compassionate leadership. This cannot be run as a democracy. Effectively, we're at a war right now. And the leader needs to take charge, the leader needs to take command, and the leader needs to actually move the troops forward. Okay, so it has to be a laser-like focus. And it's very, very critical that there is a direction set by the leadership rather than it being a democratic organization run by all the partners. You can't do that in this sort of situation. So I want to talk about 2 or 3 buckets, and I know there's a limit of time here, but the first bucket I want to talk about is money, okay? And the reason I want to talk about money, and the first thing I want to talk about money, is that liquidity, and liquidity is the key. If you do not have liquidity, you're not going to survive. It doesn't matter if you're a small firm or a large firm. Without money, you're not going to survive. So it's not a point about profitability at the moment. It's a point about liquidity. If you can survive, the profit will come later. And I think this is quite a key, and a couple of the speakers have already mentioned this. So the question then becomes, it's quite difficult at this point of time where clients are very difficult in trying to pay you, etc. So the question is how? How do you actually try to maintain your liquidity? I think one of the things law firms generally, and I'm talking about generalizations here, one of the things law firms are really bad at is billing the work in progress they've got and the collection of the work in progress. It seems to be the last thing on their minds. But this is time not to be shy. This is time to get your bills out and get paid, because the liquidity that you can create today is your mode of survival in the future. So it's really, really important you get there, you bill, you collect as much as you can, you have discounting arrangements, you have deferred payments, whatever it is, but you try to get that liquidity in. India might be slightly different, but in any other parts of the world, and as you know, I'm based in Singapore, in other parts of the world, borrowing of money is very cheap. You can get loans quite easily and revolving credit facilities quite cheaply at 1-2%. I know in India, the interest rates are higher. So in some ways, it's better to live off a revolving credit than to live off your money reserves per se, okay? The money reserves, the perceived wisdom in the past was your money reserves your cash reserves have to be between 3 and 6 months, okay? But I think given COVID and I think given the future, I think you need to try and build reserves in excess of 6 months as far as cash flow is concerned. I think the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that legal businesses are counter-cyclical. All around this table, effectively, have seen crisis of a different form. No two crises are the same, but we've seen crisis of different forms. And we all know that legal businesses are counter-cyclical. And because they are counter-cyclical, one part of the business is going to be reaping the money in at the moment, where another part of the business is probably suffering. So this counter-cyclical nature of the business we're all in sort of helps us survive to an extent. The other thing that I would talk about is clients. Okay, I've talked a bit about money. Let's talk a little bit about clients. I think the focus has to be on clients, and the focus must not be on marketing, which is a branding exercise. The focus needs to be on business development, somewhat as Cyril has already pointed out. The key thing here is not to go to your clients to sell to them. You don't want to go to them and say, here is a black box full of tricks that I've got. What do you want to buy? This is not the time to do this. This is the time basically go to their clients, empathize with your clients, try and see what their problems are, assist with their problems the best you can, give free advice where necessary, because this is building and maintaining your longer term relationships. Remember one thing, that at the end of the day, all clients, whether you're in pandemic or not, all clients want lower fees. And every business suffers this, okay? But no client wants lower value. So the key is what value, as you can see, IT connectivity is also very, very important. And the way forward is that if you haven't got a business recovery plan now, and I've been to many clients and talked to many clients of medium-sized firms in the last 6, 8, 12 months, and they've said, oh, business continuity is just an expense, we don't need it, etc. And I said, one day you will. And these people are crying now because they don't have proper business continuity plans. So you can have no business continuity plan that actually looks after every eventuality. But having lived in Hong Kong during SARS, I've been through the issue where you can't get to the office, where all the IT equipment and everything is, and you're stuck at home. So, you know, I think people in Hong Kong and Singapore have actually experienced this before, and, you know, they've taken heed of this. So the final thing you asked me, Bitika, is size. I think size matters, but it doesn't always matter. Okay, it depends. It all comes down to your cash flow, I think, at the end of the day. If you've got sufficient cash flow, then I think you can maintain the size as far as things are concerned. But I think it also depends. Okay, it also depends. But I think there are a lot of opportunities out there at the moment. If you have the cash flow, you have opportunities to go into the market to pick up talent which exists in the market that may have been made redundant, for example, okay, because of the firm they're with can't afford them and they've cut staff, etc. The other thing I think it throws up is that I think there is going to be a lot of consolidation coming out of this globally. The accounting firms consolidated for different reasons 15, 20, 30 years ago. From the Big 12, they became the Big 8, then they became the Big 6, and then they became the Big 4. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation, whether it's in the Indian market or not, because I think one way to survive perhaps is the consolidation of small to medium sized firms, because that's the way with strength and liquidity and profitability that they can go forward. So this is really what I wanted to speak about. So just to conclude, I think 3 or 4 points. Liquidity is key. Think long term. Don't think short term, because it's no point reacting short term, because you know this is a crisis that's going to go on for a long time, I suspect, and you've got to come out of this long term. The other key is to be nimble. Don't be set in your ways. You've got to think about different ways of doing things. Also be extremely proactive when you look at the markets and see what opportunities are out there. Don't be reactive and sit on your hands, because that doesn't help anyone. The other thing is have a business plan. If you don't have a business plan, have one. If you have a business plan, tear it up, because you need a new business plan, because life is not what it was 3, 4, 5 months ago. And finally, what I would say is focus on clients, because without clients, you don't have liquidity. And without liquidity, you don't have survival. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Bitika.
Thanks so much, Yarman. I think you have given us very good idea about the kind of issues we need to keep in mind during this crisis situation. And so do you think these areas that you spoke about or what you told us applies even after COVID, or will it change?
I think it will. I think what we're going to do is, I mean, Cyril mentioned a U-shaped curve, and he mentioned it in terms of the economics. But in terms of a business is it's a microeconomic is what it comes down to. And it doesn't matter what business you have. I am an eternal optimist. I've always been an eternal optimist all my life, okay? I do think that in time, things will return, perhaps not 100% to where they were before, because I think the digital platform, etc., will be used more moving forward. But I do think in a year, maybe 2 years, if a vaccine is found, whatever the situation is, I do think the norm will be people returning to the offices. I think, as we have seen with this meeting, and I've done thousands of Zoom meetings, I think, over the last few months, it is never the same, basically, to try to get a message across over a computer screen. And the dialogue doesn't take place because there is a latency in the audio communication or the video communication, and it's very, very difficult to work effectively that way. But I do think, as Cyril has rightly pointed out, that I think there will be a group in the office. I think there will be a group working from home, and I do think the gig economy, which is happening more and more even before COVID, where PeerPoint and Advent lawyers and people who work on a gig basis is perhaps a way forward as well.
Okay, thank you, Yarman. Now let's look at on the other side of things. Now let's look at how legal departments are perceiving all this and how legal departments think the law firm's performance is in these days of COVID. So Sameer, what are your views, or what do you think? Do you think there is non-availability of lawyers or legal law firms, and legal departments are doing more work themselves? Or you think the availability remains the same and the work is happening seamlessly as it was earlier with the law firms? Do you see a certain change in this time of COVID?
So thank you, Bitika. I think, let me split this into two parts, really. One is work happening? Absolutely, work is happening, because one thing is certain: COVID or no COVID, work will not stop. Now, I think there are two parts to look at it. One is the fact that our law firms doing more work internally, and therefore our law firms, being engaged as much as they were engaged earlier. And the second is you talked about the availability of law firms. Let me take the second one first. At least, my personal view and my personal experience has been that I have not faced, issues on availability of law firms. In fact, fortunately for us, we've been one group that has continued to do a lot of things during COVID. For us, barring the fact that we are sitting in the house and, working out of home, I think the rest, nothing has changed. So to that extent, our law firms have continued to support us. They have been completely there, available. Yes, I understand that the physical meetings are not as much as they used to be. In fact, we don't insist that either. But availability of law firms, support from them, and kind of the fact that they are around, they are still continuing to work, I think all of that stays the same. Which gets me to the first part, which is really the kind of work and the quantum of work that is happening. I think, see, with this new normal, and again, while we all talk about the new normal and post-COVID, pre-COVID, I think the way I look at it is COVID is one thing that came in. Obviously, it has changed everything. And therefore, things are here to change, in my view. And they will now be not same or will be different from what it used to be. Not because of any other thing, but I'm saying irrespective of whether a vaccine for this virus is available, not available, won't matter. But the rules of the game are changing. They have begun to change. They will change. And then I think some of that will become the new rules. And the moment when there are new rules that come in, it's no longer the same of the past. I think that's a given. So to that extent, when I look at, in-house, internally, clearly there are things that and like law firms are facing a challenge. And I think, at the right beginning, Mr. Basin said that, Cyril said that, Yarman said that. The fact remains that the impact on the law firm starts or stems from the corporates, from their clients. At the end of the day, if I am, continuing to make money and everything is going exactly the same way, I will continue to engage law firms the same way. Clearly, we are suffering as businesses. Kind of the businesses have changed, the business volumes have gone down, the revenues have gone down. A lot of those things are happening. So therefore, to that extent, the impact is then felt down the line as well. So
Yeah,
from my
correct.
perspective, clearly, I will look at doing a lot more things internally. For example, if it's a standard SHA, SPA, just to give you one example, I would rather do it in-house and say, I really don't need another law firm to come in here. I can save this amount and I do it myself. It's a straightforward deal. But will the complicated matters, etc., still go to the law firms? The answer is yes. So I think a lot of it will depend, or the start point will be where, as a business, you start. There is pressure on the law departments as well. How you do things, how going forward you save costs as well. Very interesting piece that Cyril talked about and Yarman talked about was the technology, and I think that's one piece to think about. Will technology advent come in and things will change? I think a little more yes. Therefore, one of the things where I would really say is that law firms will need to really up their ant on the technology, and this is not just about turning around and being savvy with, say, a Zoom or kind of
Or
being
the
able to
Microsoft
talk on
team.
the phone, etc. I think it's also about how and what you deploy within the firm, which will then support your corporate customers or your customers or kind of the people who come back to you in the long run. So therefore, it's a game of short run, long run, absolutely. Availability, I don't see a problem, but I think the issue will be how the economic turn changes, which will
Right.
impact what further goes out and what doesn't.
Correct. So Sameer, you raised a very interesting point on, how people will get used to a certain way of working and they will not go back. And we've had a lot of discussions with so many firms, and we are finding if you get used to technology, let's say you're doing your meetings from home, nobody wants to then travel 2.5 hours or 1 hour to go to meetings. You save so much of time. People are even thinking of, do we need such large, big offices anymore? If people are happy working from there and the productivity and performance can be monitored and all. So very interesting. We are all thinking like that, that maybe what we are experiencing now, we don't have to go to what we were doing earlier. Maybe we need to move on with the best practices that we are finding for ourselves this time, during this time, right? Okay, so
Absolutely.
Manjari, I'm going to, yeah, sorry, say, you're saying
No,
something?
I'm saying absolutely, you're right. And again, kind of just a small point I'll add there. Look at it from the perspective, and especially when you look at the legal fraternity. Now, I've been talking to people, whether law firms or corporates, otherwise. I am yet to find a person who has told me that, oh, I'm still trying to get to office. Everything, I've got an office at home now, I don't need to go anywhere.
Right, right.
Everybody just
I think people
established
are
it there.
saving a lot of, I find people are saving a lot of money also because they are not going out for dinner, drinks. People are no petrol, kharcha, no nothing. So there is a saving also. People
Oh,
are
yes.
feeling having. So I'm sure they're conserving some cash because of the COVID. Yeah. So Manjari, another aspect, I want you to throw light on is, most law firms are working remotely to service the legal departments. So do you see a change in that turnaround time or the quality of work? And also, if you have any suggestions for law firms, how they should be working from remote locations to be able to provide services more efficiently, any suggestions you have on that for the law firms?
Sure. Thank you, Vedika, for inviting me to such a wonderful summit on such a relevant topic, which is equally important for in-house counsels as well as for law firms. I think starting from Dr. Basil to Cyril and to Yarman and now Sameer, I think everybody has touched upon the fact that, the pandemic has changed everything and we are facing a new normal. Now, that's a given. We are all in the midst of it's a watershed moment. We are trying to look at new ways of doing things. I always look at it like Cyril mentioned, you can look at it as a glass half empty or half full. And I've always believed that, there is a way to find an opportunity in times of crisis. And one of the things that at least we have looked at internally, and I can see that also will, kind of fit into the law firm world, is that, lawyers per se have always been used to taking work home. I haven't met a lawyer who never has taken work home, be it an in-house counsel or somebody from a law firm. And we're used to working from home over weekends or, doing calls, etc. So I think this whole concept of working from home is not terribly new to at least the legal fraternity. I can understand on the commercial side, etc., people are more used to it. However, now is the time to formalize it. Circumstances have created an environment where we have to really look to formalize this work from home thing because of the circumstances. I think productivity and efficiency is key. At least I have not seen during these last 2.5, 3 months, and we have been dealing with law firms during this time, that I found any response time slower, or I have not found anyone responsive enough, or, something has not reached us because, we were working remotely and something didn't work out. I think people have pretty much adapted to a new way of doing work. I think servicing clients continues to remain top priority with law firms as much as I've interacted with them. I think they are doing, one of the things that law firms, I think, are contending very strongly with is that they were so used to having a physical connect with clients. They were so used to coming to your office, or, you going to their office, across and having those conversations, which are not happening now. But I think one of the things that I feel is that there's been no difference in responsiveness or turnaround times. But what law firms can do better, and I'm sure over a period of time, really get a better fix on this, is that, having those conversations with your clients, I think, which need not necessarily revolve around a piece of work, but generally to just kind of have some fireside chats, or to have some, brainstorming sessions on some kind of thing, doing some kind of trainings. We've seen a lot of webinars, which you invite a whole host of clients, and I agree on those things. But build that one-on-one connect is, to keep, like Cyril said, it's very important to keep your existing clients going. Yerman mentioned the same thing, because new ones will be hard to come by, but the old ones are the ones where, you need to keep that connect going. And oftentimes that is not to be related only with a piece of work when that comes up. That will always happen. But generally remaining in touch and having those conversations, because then what happens is that whenever things come up, you're on the radar, and you'll be perhaps the first go-to person for the in-house counsel to address, because it's a level of comfort and the thoughts that you share. So I think that's a very big thing that we should look at. I think the second piece I've internally felt is how the law firm, the legal department, at least in our company, I felt that during these 2.5 months, if there's one department that has actually, without sounding immodest, that has really functioned well, is the legal department. Because I think I had already tried to encourage teams to, get their fix on technologies. We're all on laptops. Half of our crowd in the plant is not even having laptops. So there was a huge infrastructure issue to get them, going online. So the legal team was all kind of geared up. And all we needed to do was, spend 3 days with IT and get all, access to shared drives, etc. And people are really working productively. We do meetings every day. We have a morning meeting where we kind of frame, every departmental head kind of works with his team to understand what are the things we are going to do today. We have a close down meeting in the evening. I do a meeting with all my HODs to see what's going on and what is it. On the contrary, I felt that we've become more productive. I think we are spending a lot of time on the real good things. and not, there is, of course, there's a separate or a very different energy of being in a physical environment in the office, and that has its own benefits in certain ways. But if you were to ask me, I really don't see that it is something that cannot be overcome and cannot, that you can't make the better of it going forward. Technology, am I still audible?
Yes, yes, you are, Manjari.
So technology will be the mainstay, and law firms will, like Samir mentioned, it's not only about doing Zoom meetings. I think it's about putting technological infrastructures into place. It's about management of documents. It's about quick accessibility to data, and obviously in all of this, keeping cybersecurity in mind. Next big challenge that all of us are going to face, law firms or in-house counsels. I think as a company, we are grappling with, making policies around, how do we monitor the productivity and efficiency of our people? Because when you see them physically in a room, you actually know what's going on. But people, when are sitting at home, are people really understanding that doesn't mean that you can lounge around at home. It is a working environment, and you really need to get dressed early in the morning as if you were going to office, and be seated on your workstations and kind of and in your home office, and carry through the day and measure your productivity towards the end. I mentioned it in a couple of other webinars that I was attending, where I always said that this is a matter of discipline. And I think I come from a company which I spent the better part of my time with, General Electric, where I think work from home was introduced very early on. And with that came a lot of sense of responsibility and discipline. So I think those are things that the law firms or managing partners of law firms would need to sit with their teams and make them understand the importance of discipline and structure around it to be able to gain more productivity and efficiency. And the last point that I would make for law firms is also, I think, again, talking about leveraging the opportunity that this throws up. When you restructure or look at the structure in the organization, and do you see that you want to correct your size and do you have the right fit of people? What this work from home would do is that it will give you access to talent, which would be in remote places. Technology can bring them to your table, and you perhaps might land up getting great talent, perhaps at very efficient costs, which perhaps even when you were in a more of a physical environment, you always wanted them to be located in a certain place, and people do have locational constraints, and sometimes that doesn't work. So that's another factor of looking at how you can add more efficiency. So I personally feel that these are times of being efficient and productive, and we have to leverage the opportunity, both in-house as well as for law firms. Vitika.
Thank you, Manjari. Very, very interesting insights on many things. And I think a couple of them which comes to my mind is that in this period, what we have seen is that people are communicating more with their teams. In fact, the bonding is much more during. Otherwise, when you were having those good times where, clients were pouring in and work was happening and money was coming in, like we had kind of lost touch. Now we are spending more time on some things. Then now we are realizing, my God, why we didn't do this earlier, So communication, like you said, has increased within your own team so much. And so a lot of things have changed. And I think there's a lot of learning for all of us in this period. A lot of learning, a lot of things we took for granted during the good times we are relearning them, and we are now using it. So thanks a ton, Manjari. Now, Lalitji, I'll just want to know that you've been interacting with so many types of law firms. So generally, just one or two challenges or opportunities which you can let us know about, which Indian law firms are going through.
No, firstly, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Firstly, I'll just speak about the challenges, The challenges is much more for the law firms because of technology, you see. Technology has played a very important role so far as the in-house counsel are concerned, or even the clients themselves are concerned. Nowadays, you see, it has become a norm for the client firstly to look into even certain legal issues because they can do their own research. And then, of course, they have very, very efficient and eminent in-house legal teams to do the work and draft documents and to advise, you see, the board of directors on even complex issues. So that would require, you see, the law firms and the lawyers to know much more, you see, than the in-house lawyers know or what the clients have already done the research for. Therefore, they have to be fine-tuned, you see, to the requirements. They have to be very up-to-date with the contemporaneous developments which are taking place all over the world in the field of law, and also about the judicial precedents and all that. The second challenge comes is also from the uncertainty in litigation. Now, my views are slightly different, you see. Yes, I do encourage, you see, virtual hearings. I'm supportive of all that. But I treat it, you see, as a temporary phase. Because in India, at least, there cannot be any substitute for physical hearings. And the virtual hearings can only be treated as a supplement. And the third point is the challenge also comes from the chartered accountants, you see, and the chartered accountancy firms, which are taking away a large chunk of legal work from the law firm, and they are giving legal advice, drafting documents, and conveyance deeds and wills and everything, you see, which the lawyers are doing, that is being done. So that is one challenge. With regard to work from home, I think after having put in about 58 years in the profession, I tend to think that we have to strike a balance. We should not go whole hog, you see, okay, work from home. Because after all, home, what is home? Home is where your family is. Therefore, don't do anything, you see, which would compromise the family, your family life, the contribution which you are supposed to give to your family. Therefore, there has to be a very valid balance, you see, between work from home and from working from your actual workspace. It is all right. The pandemic is here. We can try it out, but I would not encourage, you see, people to shift, you see, entire work to their home. Give some time, you see, to the family. The opportunities are definitely immense, and I would suggest, you see, to the emerging law firm, the mid-sized law firm, the young law firms, that they should concentrate and focus on work which they can generate from MSMEs and the SMEs, which possibly can't afford to go to the big law firms. Let them, you see, try to find what legal issues are facing MSMEs, and there are plenty of them these days, you see. One keeps on hearing them, you see, about these. Therefore, that would be another challenging assignment for the young law firms and the mid-sized law firms. And I think that is what I have to say with regard to your question, unless you have some supplementary question to me.
Thank you so much, Lalitji. And Nipun, now can we have some questions from the audience?
Yes, we do have some very interesting questions put up to us. So I'm going to read out the question, and I'm going to request the panelists, whoever wants to volunteer, because it's not directed to anybody in specific. So the first question which reads is, will the existing partnership models get outdated, and how are the law firms looking forward towards restructuring? So is the partnership model going to be outdated after the impact on the firms? So either Bitika or Yarman, I would suggest if you could just answer on this one.
Yeah, even Cyril can comment on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's.
Shall I repeat the question?
No, he can't.
I got it. Sorry.
Okay,
The
now it's
question-
fine, Cyril.
Yeah, the question was on the partnership model. Will it change? I think definitely, but I don't think it will go out. I think the partnership model is still a very powerful model, particularly for professional services. So I think it will remain, but it will undergo some mutation and it will evolve. I don't think we can go to a corporate model. That's the other alternative. I think the corporate model doesn't work for professional partnership because there's an element of peerage in professionals. So every individual in a partnership considers themselves as an entrepreneur, and they look for a certain equality of status between them and others as well. So that's ingrained into the mind of a partner. So there will be changes. I think the changes will be in terms of who wants to take how much risk. Because I think if this crisis has shown one aspect, I think it has shown that there is a lot of risk that was not thought about in terms of the partnership model. And not everybody has the same appetite to sort of deal with it. There are some people who will say, I'll take zero this year. Doesn't matter, I'll wait for a upside later. And there are others who will say, "Nahi, mere ko to pandemic or no pandemic, I want my minimum."
Right.
So therefore, I think if you look at it from the lens of risk, there are partners and there are partners. So you will see that now sort of penetrating into a partnership structure. But as a philosophy, I don't think partnership is going anywhere.
Correct. Nipun, next.
Okay, thank you. This was the question from Nachiket. Now we have a question from Vivek, which says...
But on this partnership one, I'd like to hear what Yarman has to say.
Yeah, I think, Cyril, I think throughout this discussion, I've agreed with you on everything. And I think that's absolutely correct. I think the bond that is created by partnerships, of course, there are different types of partnerships in terms of partnerships that are quite federal, like you have the Baker and McKenzie model, for example, which is really a membership of a partnership, or you have an Allen and Overy or Linklater type partnership, which is it's a unitary profit pool at the end of the day. There are, in other parts of the world, as you know, Cyril, there are corporates which are law firms as well. And from what I've seen is that the corporate model doesn't work because there could be venture capitalists or something who actually invested in that law firm. So the partners of that law firm or directors of that law firm, as they're generally called, are not true shareholders. They are effectively bumped up employees at the end of the day. So I do think you're absolutely right. I think whether it's in the accounting profession or the legal profession, etc., I think partnerships are here to stay. And I think that check and balance is very good for the client as well, because in terms of client service, etc. So I would agree with you.
All right. Thanks, Yarman. I do have another question from Vivek Agarwala. This says, it's an interesting question which asks, after COVID-19, are law firms and legal departments ready to trust the lawyers working from home? So there's also an element of trust. So are the firms or are the departments ready to trust the working from home model for lawyers?
Yeah, I think ask Sameer to take this up on the basis on the trust issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, see, it goes back to the long-term relationship. Obviously, there will be some amount of concern. I wouldn't say there's a trust deficit or something like that, but I think there would be some amount of concern for the following reasons. That one, when especially there are some critical or confidential projects that are being done. Clearly, kind of these are documents, these are papers, this is information which is out there, which, we would like that to be maintained as confidential as possible. Now, there is no reason to mistrust anybody that they will turn around and leak it. But what does happen is sometimes, you may have family around, you may have somebody around, somebody may read it. It may just go out as a very simple, just a matter of fact statement. Those things obviously goes back to the people within the law firm to make sure that they maintain. But other than that, I don't think there's an issue of trust at all. That I think is no different when they were working from an office or from home. It's just the additional piece that you really need to be a little more mindful about. The additional piece I would like to add there is, I think, kind of at least we've been seeing this, that a lot of law firms are still supporting us and supporting us from their home. they are pretty efficient, and therefore to that extent it's not changed anything in terms of deliverables.
Okay, great.
Great.
Next question.
Next question is from Hetal Kudecha. It says, how effective are virtual negotiations in an industry where sometimes day-long and week-long negotiations are held in person? So will the virtual negotiations dilute the essence of negotiation, or will it be as effective? Any thoughts?
Manjari, I would like you to address.
It's a very valid question, because I think when we do large transactions, we kind of huddle up in a room for days on an end and can kind of close it at one go, because there is a level of continuity of thought and mind share of the people there. So that model has continued to work very well. However, in the change times, I do think that, if you look at it just on the face of it, you would think that this is a challenge. But I think, again, it boils down to that level of discipline that if we can get together on a virtual platform, say for about 4 or 5 hours, give ourselves those right breaks and come back to it again. It's about gathering your thoughts and coming back. When you are in a room, in an office room together, you do break for lunches and coffee breaks, etc., and then come back to it together. It is all about telling yourself that you're doing almost the same thing, but in a virtual space. And if the people, it is also a lot dependent on the people who are participating, whether it's the law firm, whether it's the in-house counsels or other clients. How eager are you to get a job done, and how committed are you to make sure that it is done well? So if that piece is included in it with some level of structure and discipline and some ground rules of going to be conducted, I really see no reason that even in times of working virtually, these things cannot be executed. It's also a bit of a mindset that we are all used to, being together physically, that we have to learn to overcome.
Yeah, thank you, Manjari.
Great, thanks. I think we're going to take 2 quick questions. One is from Vaibhav Ganjiwala. It says Mr. Sameer Chuk has asked law firms to invest more in technology other than just the connectivity platforms. So which other areas, if you could elaborate in terms of where law firms could invest in technology?
Yeah, I think, see, when I talk about law firms investing in technology, remember that as the time passes, there'll be more remote working, there'll be more virtual conversation, there'll be more virtual negotiations, there will be more kind of document sharing, which happens really not in physical form. To give an example, earlier litigation was, you had those files, and I've seen that, and I'm probably used to it, that every time we have a matter in the court, I have a whole set of files that comes to me as well, which is fully paper, etc. Obviously, in these times and going forward, is that going to be possible? Probably no. So I think when I'm talking about technology, it's also about how do you make sharing of documents easier? How do you make sure that what you use is accessible by the client, and he doesn't need to then turn around and marry 2 different technologies where you have a certain way to share it and a certain drive that you use on. The systems of the client are very different, and then the 2 IT departments are talking, trying to figure it out. I think it's more about how you get into more compatible technologies, how you make sure that the technologies are such that they are talking to each other and makes it easy. Additionally, for example, if you look at, say, video conferencing or others, if you're doing a virtual negotiation, now one way to do it is that you get into a virtual negotiation, you and your client are sitting in different places, but you have a phone on alongside to have a chat. At the same time, then you want to turn around and have certain, say, chat rooms or certain kind of technology which allows you to have a separate chat room where you can just go there, have a chat, come back, and then continue the negotiation. So to me, when I'm talking about technology, it's beyond just, say, a Zoom or a way to just talk virtually. But I think it's also about being able to really simplify how you work seamlessly together.
Okay.
I mean, just on this one, I would really think, I think maybe Yarman would have some suggestion.
Yeah, I want Yarman to, Yarman, I have one very sensitive question, which Cyril did mention about right sizing law firms. And I think it's very important for people to know, because a lot of questions coming out as to how do you actually do the right sizing? Do you kind of replace the non-performing, lawyers with performing lawyers? What is the mechanism? How do you, and there are emotional issues here. There are compassion issues, empathy issues, for people to leave the firm. And a lot of lawyers at this stage in India are also wondering, what will happen to them if they're laid off? What happens to them with their salary cuts? So this is, I think, a very, very concerning issue right now with most of the lawyers. So I would like you to give us some views based on your international experience also.
Yeah, thanks, Ritika. The question about right sizing, particularly when you're going through a crisis, is very, very difficult. Okay. The first thing I would say is that this is where the leaders need to stand up and be very, very directive in the way they do things. The key really is that when a crisis hits, that the leaders are not rigid or reactionary or emotional in the way they do things. Because a simple solution is, oh, there's a pandemic, there's a crisis, we need to save cost, let's cut the support staff, let's cut some of the junior staff, etc. But that is not necessarily the answer to the question. The right sizing issue, in my view, in a well-run law firm, no matter what the size of the law firm is something that should be done in times of non-crisis as well. So the thing is that you need to look at the non-performing people in your business at all times. What happens is that during a crisis, the microscope comes on it a bit more, because the difficult conversations you wanted to have and the emotional things that you've been putting off for many, many years and saying, oh, this is a nice chap, we can live with him, the productivity is not great, but we're making a lot of money, it doesn't matter. But it's at times like this that this problem arises, okay? So I think the first thing is that the right sizing or the looking at how your makeup is in terms of your business, small, medium, or large, it doesn't matter, should be an ongoing process in the first place. The other point that I would make, and as I've always said, I am an eternal optimist. I think crisis, as we've all seen in the past, things will always come back. We don't know how long in this particular case, because this is a crisis of health and it's a crisis of economy put together. So it may be a longer term before this comes back. So I think one of the things the leaders of the business should do is weigh up first, what is the cost of redundancy, plus the cost in a few months or a year or 18 months of rehiring and retraining, and look at those costs combined before you decide that I want to take this particular cost out of my business today. Because the overall cost over a period of time may actually be more rather than less. Now, all this comes down to the very first statement that I made about liquidity. If you haven't got this liquidity, then it's very, very difficult for you to be able to make these right-sizing decisions, because the word right-sizing is a very polite way of saying, do we fire people, is what it comes down to, okay? But the point is, it's not just a question of firing people. When the business comes back and you get different business channels, you have to hire people. It's easier to take your people and retrain them for those new business channels because they're already in the business as it stands. So I think this all needs to be taken in a mix. But the one point I will make is that if you do decide to right size and you just do decide that this is the only way and the decision made by the leaders, this is the only way, you need to do what they call a pyramid cut. And the pyramid cut really is you cut the business from top to bottom. All right, you just don't cut the chai lady, basically. You don't cut just the trainees, or you don't cut the support staff only, because actually when you add all of that up, it may not save you much money. And it may create you more emotion than anything else. a chai lady who's been there for 35, 40 years, you fire, you save a few rupees. I mean, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. So the pyramid cut is very important. And back in 2008, when we had the financial crisis globally, I was with Allen and Overy at that time, and many of the Magic Circle firms at that time did what they call the pyramid cut. And the pyramid cut really was to take 10% out of the business from partner down to the tea lady. So at all levels, you take 10% out of the business, because effectively you then move forward with 90% or 85% of your business or whatever it is intact, moving forward into the next phase of that business's life cycle is what it comes down to. So back to you, Pritika. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any more questions? We can take one more question and we have to wind up. And we can take all of the questions that are not answered. You can email it to us and we will try and get you the answers.
So let's just quickly take the last question. This is from Arjit Benjamin. It says, in the challenging times, how does one continue to keep the communication with the clients alive? It's more from the perspective of a litigator when there's not much happening in the court. How do you keep the communication channel with the clients alive? Any thoughts on client communication and client interaction?
Manjari or Sameer, one of them?
Let me give it a shot. I personally feel that it is important to just keep scheduling time on, just have a word pick up the phone, try and talk to your clients, try and see if you can catch up with them for a quick session. Think of some relevant topic that you've had some thoughts around that you'd like to share. You've got to figure out some ways of keeping the communication going, and that could be just a hello, how do you do? Just 2 days ago, I had someone reach out to me. He's also from one of the law firms, and just there was no specific agenda, there was no specific reason, but we just chatted for the next 15-20 minutes, and it just helps to keep people on the radar. It helps to, there may be a thing or two that somebody might know, which is relevant, which is new, which can be, talked of during the conversation. But, simple. You could do formats of doing it. One could be very informal, picking up the phone, having a quick chat. The other could be that, hey, there's something that, we've come up with. This is very interesting. Maybe you'd like it. Let me set up a quick call. I do appreciate it's not very easy to get those things going, because I think time always becomes a constraint. But I think a bit of perseverance and a bit of, diplomacy thrown into it, I think can work wonders. And once you connect, and oftentimes that happens that, you might really have something useful, and then the conversation kind of goes forward from there.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, if you want to be in touch with your clients, just pick up a phone and give a call, and there you are.
I just want to add something there, Pritika, and I think that's also important, because especially litigation, as well as from the perspective of even, kind of on the corporate side, litigation, I think one more thing that I would expect, law firms or lawyers to really do is, if there is a matter that's going on, obviously it's not coming up, it's not being heard. But if there is something that becomes as a development, or, a similar issue got discussed or got touched upon in another litigation somewhere, pick that up and let the client know that, you have a matter like this is what has happened, can have an impact. So you keep that communication alive in the manner that it's not just a hi, hello, it's also about, they thinking and still worrying about your matter. And that gives a lot more comfort to the client. Secondly, from a transaction perspective, similarly, kind of there are past transactions that have been done. There will be some transactions that will happen in the future. But for past transaction, if say a law has changed or some regulation has come in, something has come in, again, go back and say, this is what you've done now. Going forward, if you want to do similar, here are 2 additional pieces that you will need to think about. So I think it's also important to let the client know that we are thinking about you. In fact, kind of to me, it's very critical, because at the end of the day, one of the things, my advice to law firms there will be, if you want to communicate with your client, keep yourself, really within the mind. play to your strengths. And if you play to your strengths, your client's not going to leave you. I can assure that.
Yeah, I think very, very true what Samir has said. I think you need to be aware of what's happening with that client, what's happening on their businesses also on a day-to-day basis, so that at the right time you can connect with them and kind of advise them rather than just wait for that matter to come, or it's not coming up for a long time, then do what, right? So very, very valid point, Samir. So I think with this, I must thank all of you for being with us here today and to make such a fantastic discussion, and see you sometime soon. And
yes, more power to everyone. I'm very, very thankful to all of you who've come and joined us in support today. We shall be seeing you at the next virtual summit very, very soon. So thank you, everyone, and until next time, all the best. Once again.
Yeah, and last, anybody has any questions, they can email it to us, and we will definitely make sure you get your answers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.